Chapter 1: The Grind Before the Glitter. David Wilson believed in two things: coffee before emails and never letting anyone drive his Corvette. Both rules had served him well for years, and he saw no reason to change them now. Monday morning found him in his usual spot. Desk by the window, blinds half open to let in the pale December light. Outside, the city was dressed for Christmas. Twinkling lights strung across streets like promises David didn't believe in. Inside, his office hummed with fluorescent efficiency. David liked his job, paid the bills, kept him busy, and didn't demand more than he was willing to give. He wasn't the guy who stayed late for drinks or joined fantasy football leagues. He clocked in, did his work, and clocked out. Simple, clean, peaceful. He sipped his coffee and opened his inbox. The subject line that caught his eye wasn't from a client. It was from HR. Subject: Christmas Party Planning Committee. Congratulations. David frowned. Congratulations? That word rarely meant good news in corporate emails. He clicked. Dear David, we're excited to announce you've been selected as part of the 5-person team to plan this year's company Christmas party. Your enthusiasm for the holiday season makes you a perfect fit. David chuckled. Enthusiasm? He liked Christmas, sure, but he wasn't exactly the guy wearing Santa hats to meetings. Still, it wasn't the worst assignment. He hit reply. Sounds great. Looking forward to helping. He meant it. Christmas was one of the few times of year he let himself feel something close to joy. Lights, music, the smell of pine. It reminded him of simpler times. By noon, the committee roster landed in his inbox. For names he barely recognized and one that made him pause. Sunny Cruse. He knew the name. Everyone did. Sunny worked in a different department 2 floors up. Quiet, efficient, the kind of person who slipped through hallways like a whisper. David had never spoken to her, but he'd noticed her, because guys always noticed. He shrugged and closed the email. No reason to overthink it. The first meeting was scheduled for Wednesday. David arrived early, because arriving early was his thing. The conference room smelled faintly of cinnamon from a decorative candle someone had optimistically lit. He set his coffee down and glanced at the door just as it opened. Sunny walked in. She was, well, her name fit. Warm brown hair, soft sweater in winter white, eyes that seemed to hold their own light even when her expression didn't. She nodded politely and took a seat across from him. David, right? Her voice was calm, even. Yeah, he said, offering a smile. Sunny, that's me. She smiled back, small, polite, like a gift wrapped in tissue paper. Others trickled in and the meeting began. Ideas flew: venue options, catering, themes. David tossed out a few suggestions, nothing fancy. Sunny spoke only when asked, her tone professional but distant. When the meeting ended, David lingered, stacking chairs because someone had to. Sunny was gathering her notes, movements precise. You okay with all this? He asked casually. She looked up, surprised. What do you mean? You seemed, I don't know, not thrilled about Christmas parties. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. You're observant. I try. He shrugged. If you'd rather not be on the committee, it's fine, she said quickly, then softer. Just, not my favorite time of year. David nodded. He didn't push. He wasn't the pushing type. But as he walked out, he found himself wondering why. That night, David drove home in his Corvette, the engine's purr a familiar comfort. The city lights blurred past, red and green reflections dancing on the hood. He thought about Sunny, about the way her voice dipped when she said not my favorite time of year. He didn't know her story. He didn't need to. But for the first time in a long time, David felt something stir. A curiosity, quiet but insistent, like the hum of his car beneath his hands. Christmas was coming. And maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. Chapter 2, The Assignment. David had never seen the HR conference room look so festive. Someone had gone overboard with garland, draping it across the whiteboard like ivy in a winter jungle. A ceramic snowman grinned from the corner table, its carrot nose slightly chipped, as if it had survived one too many office moves. David arrived 5 minutes early because arriving early was his thing, and claimed a chair near the end of the table. He set down his coffee, the steam curling upward like a promise of sanity. The door opened, and in came Sunny Cruse. She wasn't wearing the bright red or green that half the office seemed to favor this time of year. Instead, she wore a soft gray sweater, understated but elegant, paired with black slacks. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands framing her face. She looked like someone who belonged in a quiet cafe, not a room full of forced holiday cheer. Morning, David said, offering a smile. Morning. Her voice was calm, polite, but her eyes flicked to the snowman like it had personally offended her. Others trickled in: Mark from accounting, who had the energy of a Labrador, Jenna from HR, who had probably masterminded the Garland situation, and a guy named Trevor from IT who looked like he'd rather be debugging code than discussing centerpieces. Jenna clapped her hands. Okay, team. Welcome to the Christmas Party Planning Committee. This year we're going big. Think memorable. Think Instagram-worthy. Think budget, Trevor muttered, earning a laugh from David. Jenna ignored him. We've got 3 weeks. Venue, catering, entertainment, decorations, the works. Let's brainstorm. Ideas flew like snowflakes in a blizzard. Mark suggested a live band. Jenna wanted a photo booth with props. Trevor proposed a virtual reality Santa experience, which sounded expensive and slightly terrifying. David kept his suggestions practical. Good food, simple decor, maybe a raffle. He wasn't here to reinvent Christmas, just to make sure people had a good time. Sunny spoke only when asked. Her voice was steady, her ideas minimal. Maybe a hot chocolate station. Keep the playlist balanced. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed enthusiasm. David noticed. He always noticed. When the meeting wrapped, chairs scraped against the floor, and people filed out with promises to email ideas. David lingered, stacking chairs because someone had to. Sunny was gathering her notes, movements precise, like she was folding away pieces of herself. You okay with all this? He asked casually. She looked up, surprised. What do you mean? You seemed, I don't know, not thrilled about Christmas parties. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. You're observant. I try. He shrugged. If you'd rather not be on the committee, it's fine, she said quickly, then softer. Just, not my favorite time of year. David nodded. He didn't push. He wasn't the pushing type. But as he walked out, he found himself wondering why. That night, David drove home in his Corvette, the engines purr a familiar comfort. The city lights blurred past, red and green reflections dancing on the hood. He thought about Sunny, about the way her voice dipped when she said not my favorite time of year. He didn't know her story. He didn't need to. But for the first time in a long time, David felt something stir. A curiosity, quiet but insistent, like the hum of his car beneath his hands. Christmas was coming. And maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. Chapter 3, Tinsel and Tension. The second committee meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon, which meant two things. The office smelled faintly of reheated leftovers, and everyone was counting the minutes until the weekend. David arrived early again because arriving early was practically his brand, and claimed the same chair as last time. He liked consistency. It was predictable, like the hum of his Corvette's engine or the way coffee tasted better in his favorite mug. Sunny walked in a few minutes later, balancing a notebook and a pen like they were shields against the chaos of holiday planning. Her gray sweater had been swapped for deep green today, but it wasn't festive. It was practical, the kind of green that belonged in a forest, not under fluorescent lights. Hey, David said, offering a smile. Hi. She slid into the chair across from him, her expression polite but distant. Mark burst in next, humming Jingle Bell Rock like he was auditioning for a department store commercial. Jenna followed, arms full of printouts, and Trevor trailed behind, already scrolling on his phone. Okay, team, Jenna chirped, clapping her hands like a kindergarten teacher. We need to lock down the theme today. Big decision. Mark grinned. Winter Wonderland. Trevor didn't look up. Cliché. Ugly sweater party? Jenna suggested. Sunny's pen paused mid-note. That's loud. David chuckled. Not your style. She glanced at him, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. Not exactly. What would you pick? He asked, curious. Sunny hesitated, then shrugged. Something simple. Classic. Lights, music, good food. No gimmicks. David nodded. I like that. Mark groaned. Boring. Timeless? David countered, and Sunny's lips curved. Just a little, but enough to make David feel like he'd scored a point. The meeting spiraled into debates about centerpieces and playlists. David tossed out practical suggestions, Trevor shot down anything that sounded expensive, and Jenna tried to keep the energy high. Sunny spoke sparingly, her voice calm, her ideas neat and efficient, like she was building a bridge while everyone else was throwing glitter in the river. When the meeting ended, chairs scraped, papers shuffled, and people scattered like snowflakes in a gust of wind. David stayed behind again, stacking chairs because someone had to. Sunny lingered too, tucking her pen into her notebook. You really don't like Christmas parties, do you? David asked, keeping his tone light. She looked up, surprised. You're persistent. Just curious. He shrugged. You seem uncomfortable. Sunny exhaled softly, like she was weighing how much truth to give him. It's complicated. Complicated how? Her gaze drifted to the snowman in the corner, its chipped nose grinning like it knew secrets. Let's just say Christmas hasn't been cheerful for a while. David didn't press. He wasn't the pressing type. But something in her voice tugged at him. A quiet ache, like a song played in a minor key. Well, he said gently, maybe this year will surprise you. Sunny's eyes met his, and for a moment, the distance between them felt smaller. Maybe, she said softly. That night, David drove home through streets strung with lights, his Corvette slicing through the cold like a promise. He thought about Sunny, about the way her voice dipped when she said complicated. He didn't know her story, but he wanted to. Chapter 4, Coffee and Confessions. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of steel and air sharp enough to bite. David parked his Corvette in its usual spot, the red paint gleaming defiantly against the gray December gloom. He killed the engine, sat for a moment, and let the quiet hum of the car fade. The office was already buzzing when he walked in, holiday chatter, the faint scent of peppermint from someone's desk diffuser. David nodded to a few coworkers, offered his standard half smile, and made a beeline for the break room. Coffee first. Always coffee first. He was stirring sugar into his mug when he heard a soft voice behind him. Morning. David turned. Sunny stood in the doorway, her coat draped over one arm, hair slightly tousled like the wind had tried to rearrange her morning. She looked tired. Not in the way that sleep fixes, but in the way that life sometimes doesn't. Morning, David said, offering a smile. Coffee? She nodded, moving to the counter. Please. He slid the pot toward her. You okay? Sunny hesitated, her hand hovering over the mug like it needed permission to land. Why do you ask? You look. He searched for a word that wasn't exhausted or miserable. Like Monday hit harder than usual. That earned him a faint laugh, soft, almost reluctant. You're not wrong. David leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee. If it helps, I'm pretty sure Mondays are a conspiracy. Sunny smiled, small, but real. You think everything's a conspiracy? Only the things that make sense. He shrugged. Like printer jams. Or why HR thinks Garland improves productivity. Her laugh came easier this time, and David felt something loosen in the air between them. They ended up walking out together, mugs in hand, toward the quiet corner near the windows where the city stretched out in muted winter tones. It wasn't planned, but it felt natural. Sunny stared out at the skyline, her fingers curled around the mug like it was the only warm thing in the world. You really like Christmas, don't you? David nodded. Yeah, always have. Why? Her voice was curious, not challenging, like she genuinely wanted to know. He thought for a moment. I guess it's simple. Lights, music, people trying to be a little kinder than usual. Feels like the world takes a breath. Sunny's gaze stayed on the glass. I used to feel that way. David caught the shift in her tone. The way it dipped, quiet and heavy. Used to? She hesitated, then sighed. My parents split right before Christmas. 3 years ago. It was messy. David didn't speak. He just listened. Sunny's fingers tightened on the mug. Since then, holidays feel like pretending. Smiles for photos, gifts no one really wants. It's exhausting. David nodded slowly. That sounds rough. Her lips curved in a humorless smile. Understatement of the year. He wanted to say something that mattered, but words felt clumsy. So he settled for honesty. I'm sorry. Sunny glanced at him, and for a moment her eyes softened. Thanks. They stood in silence for a beat, the hum of the office fading behind them. Outside, snow began to fall, tiny flakes drifting like secrets no one asked for. David watched them, then said quietly, maybe this year doesn't have to be pretending. Sunny looked at him, and something flickered in her expression. Uncertainty, hope, maybe both. Maybe, she said softly. When David returned to his desk, he felt different. Not in a dramatic, movie-ending way. Just lighter, like someone had cracked a window in a room he didn't realize was stuffy. Sunny wasn't just a name on a committee anymore. She was a person with shadows and stories, and for reasons he couldn't quite explain, David wanted to know more. Chapter 5. Decking the halls and dodging drama. By the time Friday rolled around, the office looked like Christmas had exploded in slow motion. Tinsel draped across cubicle walls, paper snowflakes dangling from ceiling tiles, and a suspiciously cheerful inflatable Santa grinning from the reception desk like he knew everyone's secrets. David stood in the break room, sleeves rolled up, staring at a box of ornaments that looked like they'd survived a war. Half were chipped, a few were missing hooks, and one had a faded sticker that read property of HR, do not remove. Festive, he muttered. Festive is one word for it, Sunny said from behind him. David turned, and there she was, hair pulled back, wearing a navy sweater that made her eyes look like winter skies. She held a spool of ribbon like it was a weapon she wasn't sure how to use. You ready for this? David asked, gesturing to the chaos. Sunny gave him a look that said define ready. I was promised minimal glitter. Promises were made, David said solemnly. Promises will be broken. That earned him a laugh, soft, but real. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh without hesitation, and it hit him like a chord he wanted to hear again. The committee had decided to decorate the main lobby first. Jenna was in full command mode, barking instructions like a general in a war against blandness. Mark was untangling lights with the enthusiasm of a man who believed in miracles. Trevor was pretending to troubleshoot the office Wi-Fi so he wouldn't have to climb a ladder. David and Sunny ended up working side by side on the garland. It was supposed to be simple. Wrap it around the banister, secure with ribbon. Easy. Except the garland had other plans. Hold this, David said, handing her one end. Sunny took it, arching a brow. You sound very confident. I've done this before, David said, looping the other end around the railing. On what? A dollhouse? David grinned. My apartment balcony. It's practically the same thing. Sunny smirked, and for a moment, the tension she carried like armor seemed to slip. They worked in silence for a few minutes, punctuated by Jenna's enthusiastic commentary and Mark's occasional yelp when the lights fought back. Then Sunny spoke, her voice low enough that it didn't carry beyond them. You really like this, don't you? David glanced at her. Christmas. She nodded. Yeah, he said simply. Always have. Sunny's fingers adjusted the ribbon, precise and careful. I wish I still did. David didn't push. He just said, maybe you will again. Her eyes flicked to his, and for a second, something unspoken passed between them. Something that felt like possibility. The garland finally surrendered, and David stepped back to admire their work. Not bad, he said. Sunny tilted her head. It's acceptable. David laughed. High praise. She smiled, small, but enough to make the fluorescent lights feel less harsh. By the time they finished, the lobby looked like a Christmas card someone had actually tried on. Jenna was thrilled. Mark was tangled in lights but grinning, and Trevor was still pretending to fix the Wi-Fi. David gathered the empty boxes, glancing at Sunny as she brushed a stray ribbon from her sleeve. She looked lighter, not transformed, not suddenly merry, but lighter, like maybe the weight she carried had shifted an inch. And for reasons David didn't fully understand, that felt like a win. That night, driving home in his Corvette, David thought about her laugh, the way it sounded like something breaking free. He wanted to hear it again. He didn't know what that meant yet, but he knew this. Christmas was starting to feel different. Chapter 6, The Corvette Connection. The email came late Thursday afternoon. Subject line, planning session, my place? David blinked at the sender. Sunny Cruse. He opened it. Hi David. Russell's house is quieter than the office, and we need to finalize the catering list. If you're free Saturday afternoon, come by. Address below. Sunny. David read it twice, partly because he wasn't expecting it and partly because the name Russell snagged his attention. Her dad? He typed back. Sounds good. I'll bring the spreadsheet. And maybe a little curiosity. Saturday arrived cold and bright, the kind of winter day that made the Corvette look like a fire engine against the snow-dusted streets. David pulled up to the address Sunny had sent. A neat brick house with a wreath on the door, and a driveway that spoke of someone who cared about cars. He killed the engine, stepped out, and immediately noticed the shape under the car cover near the garage. Long, low, unmistakable curves. David grinned. Corvette. The door opened, and Sunny appeared, bundled in a cream sweater and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. She smiled, small, but warmer than he'd seen before. Hey, she said. Hey, David replied, holding up the folder. Brought the boring stuff. Perfect, she said, stepping aside. Come in. The house smelled like coffee and something faintly citrus. Cozy, lived in, with a Christmas tree in the corner that looked like it had been decorated by someone who cared but didn't overdo it. Dad's in the garage, Sunny said, leading him through the kitchen. He'll want to meet you. David followed, curiosity humming like an engine at idle. The garage door swung open, and there he was, Russell Cruse, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a flannel shirt and the kind of grin that said he'd seen things and laughed anyway. Sunny, Russell said, then spotted David. So this is the guy. David extended a hand. David Wilson. Russell shook it firmly, then jerked his thumb toward the covered car. You like Corvettes? David's grin widened. Love them. Russell whipped off the cover like a magician, revealing his best trick. A 1972 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray gleamed beneath, deep metallic blue, curves that looked like they'd been sculpted by angels with attitude. David let out a low whistle. Beautiful. Russell's eyes lit up. She's my pride and joy. Had her 20 years. David stepped closer, reverent. Original engine? Rebuilt it myself, Russell said, puffing up like a man who'd earned bragging rights. Upgraded the carb, swapped the exhaust. She purrs like a kitten and roars like a lion. David laughed. I've got a 90 ZR1. Bright red. Russell's grin turned conspiratorial. ZR1? You're speaking my language. And just like that, they were off, talking horsepower, torque, paint jobs, the eternal debate over stock versus custom. Words flew like sparks, laughter punctuating every story. David barely noticed Sunny slip away until he glanced toward the door and realized she was gone. Guilt twisted in his gut. He was here for planning, not a car convention. Russell caught the look and chuckled. Don't worry, son. She's fine. That's why I like cars. They're easy to understand. David smiled, but the words stuck with him. When Sunny returned with coffee, David straightened, trying to look less like a kid in a candy store. Sorry, he said sheepishly. Got carried away. Sunny handed him a mug, her eyes warm with amusement. You and Dad speak fluent Corvette. I should have expected this. Russell winked. He's good people, Sunny. David felt something shift, small but undeniable. Approval. Sunny's cheeks flushed, and she ducked her head, pretending to fuss with the papers. David caught the flicker of a smile she couldn't quite hide. And for the first time in a long time, David felt like maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Chapter 7, Sparks Under the Hood. David had always prided himself on being pragmatic. Feelings were like engine trouble, manageable if you caught them early, catastrophic if you ignored them. But as he drove home from Sunny's house that Saturday evening, the Corvette humming beneath him, he realized something. This wasn't a minor rattle. It was a full-blown misfire in his carefully tuned life. He liked her, not in the casual, She's nice way he'd felt about coworkers before. This was different, deeper, sharper, like the first time he saw a Corvette as a kid and knew he'd never be the same. Sunny wasn't flashy. She didn't demand attention. She was quiet, steady, with a smile that felt earned, not given. And when she laughed, really laughed, it was like hearing a song you didn't know you'd been waiting for. David gripped the steering wheel, the city lights blurring past. He wasn't a man who chased things anymore. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. But this didn't feel like chasing. It felt like possibility. The next committee meeting was Monday, and David arrived early again. He told himself it was habit, not anticipation, but his pulse betrayed him when Sunny walked in. She looked different today. Hair swept up, a soft burgundy sweater that made her skin glow. She smiled when she saw him, and David felt something shift in his chest, like a gear sliding into place. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he replied, trying to sound casual and failing spectacularly. They settled into their seats as Jenna launched into her usual pep talk about creating magic. David half listened, his focus snagging on the way Sunny's fingers curled around her pen, the way her eyes crinkled when Mark cracked a joke about mistletoe. He wanted to make her laugh again. He wanted to know what made her smile like that. After the meeting, as chairs scraped and papers shuffled, Russell's words came back to him. "He's good people, Sunny." David hadn't missed the way Sunny flushed when her dad said that, and he hadn't missed the subtle thumbs-up Russell gave him when they shook hands goodbye. It was ridiculous how much that tiny gesture mattered, but it did. Later that night, David sat in his apartment, laptop open, spreadsheet glowing on the screen. He was supposed to be finalizing the catering list, but his mind kept drifting, to Sunny, to her laugh, to the way her eyes softened when she talked about complicated holidays. He didn't know what this was yet, but he knew one thing: he wanted to find out. And for a man who'd spent years avoiding entanglements, that realization felt like the start of something big. Chapter 8, Party Night Pandemonium. The company Christmas party was supposed to start at 7. By 6:30, the lobby looked like a snow globe someone had shaken too hard. Lights twinkled from every corner. The catering tables groaned under trays of hors d'oeuvres, and the photo booth props were already scattered like confetti from a parade. David stood near the entrance, adjusting his tie and wondering if he'd overdressed. He'd gone with a charcoal suit, classic, safe. The kind of choice that said, "I tried, but not too hard." He scanned the room. People were filing in, laughter rising like steam. Mark was already at the punch bowl, Jenna was fussing with the centerpiece, and Trevor was pretending to care about the playlist while secretly texting under the table. And then Sunny walked in. David's breath caught. Not dramatically, not like a movie, but enough that he felt it. She wore a deep emerald dress, simple but elegant, with sleeves that brushed her wrists and a neckline that hinted without shouting. Her hair was loose, curling softly around her shoulders, and when she smiled at someone near the door, David felt something in his chest shift like a gear sliding into place. He wasn't the only one who noticed. Heads turned. But Sunny didn't seem to care. She moved through the crowd with quiet grace, like she belonged without trying. David waited until she reached the catering table before approaching. "Hey," he said, aiming for casual and landing somewhere near awkward. Sunny turned, her eyes lighting when they met his. "Hey, you look." He stopped himself before saying amazing too much too soon. "Festive." Her lips curved. "That's one word for it." David chuckled, relieved. "Glad you came. Glad you talked me into it," she said softly, and David felt that gear click again. The night unfolded in a blur of laughter, music, and mild chaos. Someone spilled punch on the raffle tickets. Mark tried to start a conga line and failed spectacularly. Jenna insisted on group photos every 20 minutes. David and Sunny ended up at the edge of the dance floor when the DJ switched to something slow. Classic Sinatra, smooth and warm like whiskey. Sunny hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of her glass. David swallowed, then held out his hand. "Dance?" She looked at him, really looked, and for a moment he thought she might say no. Then she set down her glass and placed her hand in his. Her fingers were cool, her grip steady. David led her onto the floor, his heart thudding like a misaligned piston. He wasn't a great dancer, serviceable at best, but Sunny moved easily, her steps light, her gaze steady on his. The music wrapped around them, soft and slow, and for the first time all night, the noise faded. It was just them. Her hand in his, her breath warm against his shoulder, her smile like something rare and worth keeping. David didn't speak. He didn't need to, because in that moment he knew this wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something real. When the song ended, they lingered a beat too long before stepping apart. Sunny's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. "Not bad," she said, teasing. David grinned. "High praise." She laughed, soft, genuine, and David felt like he'd won something he hadn't even known he was competing for. Later, as he drove home through streets strung with lights, the Corvette humming beneath him, David replayed that dance in his mind. The warmth of her hand, the way her smile felt like a secret. He didn't know what came next, but for the first time in years he wanted to find out. Chapter 9, After the lights fade. The party wound down slowly, like a song fading into silence. The The photo booth props were scattered across the floor, the punch bowl was a graveyard of melting ice, and Jenna was still buzzing with post-event adrenaline, snapping pictures of the centerpiece like it had cured world hunger. David slipped out before the cleanup frenzy began. He wasn't avoiding it, well, maybe a little, but mostly he wanted air. The lobby doors opened to a crisp December night, the kind that smelled faintly of pine and possibility. He stepped outside, adjusting his coat, and there she was. Sunny stood near the edge of the parking lot, her emerald dress catching the glow of the streetlights. She had her arms wrapped around herself, not in discomfort, but in thought. David hesitated, then walked over. "Hey!" She turned, her smile soft and tired but real. "Hey! Escaping the chaos?" he asked. Something like that. Her breath curled in the cold, a fragile ribbon of white. "You? Same." He shoved his hands into his pockets, suddenly aware of how quiet it was out here compared to the noise inside. "You did great tonight." Sunny laughed lightly. "I arranged napkins and argued about playlist order. Hardly heroic." "Still," David said, his voice gentle. It mattered. Her eyes flicked to his, and for a moment, the distance between them felt smaller than it had all night. They walked slowly toward the far end of the lot, where the lights were softer and the hum of traffic sounded like a distant lullaby. Sunny spoke first. "You know, I didn't think I'd enjoy tonight." David glanced at her. "But you did." She nodded, her smile faint but warm. "More than I expected." David felt something loosen in his chest. "Good." Sunny's gaze drifted toward the street, her voice quieter now. "It's strange. For years, Christmas felt heavy, like a reminder of everything that broke." David didn't interrupt. He just listened the way he had in the break room weeks ago. Sunny exhaled slowly. "But tonight, it didn't feel like that. Not completely." David swallowed, his throat tight. "I'm glad." She looked at him, then really looked, and the weight in her eyes was different. Softer, like maybe the cracks were letting in light. They stopped near his car, the Corvette gleaming under the street lamp like a promise. Sunny's gaze landed on it, and her lips curved. "Still guarding it like a dragon?" she teased. David grinned. "Always. Dad would love to see it," she said, her voice tinged with amusement. "He's still talking about you, by the way." David chuckled. "All good things, I hope." Sunny's smile deepened. "Mostly." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, like the pause before a green light. David wanted to say something that mattered, but words felt clumsy. So he settled for honesty. "I like tonight," he said quietly. "Mostly because of you." Sunny's breath caught, just enough for him to notice. Her eyes softened, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Me too." They stood there for another moment, the cold nipping at their skin, the night humming with things unsaid. Then Sunny smiled, small, but certain, and David felt like the world had shifted an inch in the right direction. Christmas lights twinkled in the distance, and for the first time in years, David believed in what they promised. Chapter 10: A Corvette Christmas. The idea hit David on Tuesday night, somewhere between his second cup of coffee and the glow of the city lights outside his apartment window. He wanted to do something for Sunny, something that wasn't about committees or spreadsheets or garland wars, something that felt like him. And when he glanced at the Corvette parked outside, its red paint catching the reflection of Christmas lights strung across the street, the answer was obvious. By Thursday, the plan was set. He texted her after work. "Got time Friday night? I want to show you something." Her reply came a few minutes later. Curious. "What kind of something?" David grinned at his phone. "The good kind. Dress warm." Friday evening was cold enough to make breath curl like smoke. David pulled up to Sunny's building, the Corvette rumbling low and smooth, its engine purr like a secret only they shared. Sunny stepped out a moment later, bundled in a cream coat, scarf tucked neatly around her neck. Her cheeks were pink from the chill, her hair catching the glow of the street lamp. David climbed out, opening the passenger door with a flourish. "Your chariot awaits." Sunny laughed softly, eyes widening as she took in the car. "Wow, you weren't kidding." "Never joke about Corvettes," David said solemnly, earning another laugh, the kind that warmed him more than the heater ever could. She slid into the seat, her fingers brushing the leather like it was something sacred. "This is incredible." David grinned, settling behind the wheel. "Wait until you hear her sing." The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful, and Sunny's eyes lit up like Christmas lights. They pulled onto the main road, the city unfolding in ribbons of color, red and green lights strung across lampposts, storefronts glowing with holiday cheer. Snowflakes drifted lazily, catching the headlights like sparks. Sunny leaned back, her breath fogging the window as she watched the world blur past. "This is amazing." David glanced at her, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Glad you think so." She turned to him, her smile soft. "You really love this car, don't you?" David nodded. "She's more than a car. Took years to save for her. Learned a lot fixing her up." Sunny tilted her head. "Like what?" David thought for a moment. "That anything worth having takes work, care, patience. You take care of the little problems, the big ones don't show up. Sunny's gaze lingered on him, her expression thoughtful. That's a good philosophy. David shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Works for cars. Maybe for life too. Her smile deepened, and for a moment, the hum of the engine felt like the soundtrack to something bigger than either of them had planned. They drove through the park where the city strung lights every December. A tunnel of color arching overhead, glowing like magic. Sunny gasped softly, her hand pressing against the glass. David, this is beautiful. He slowed the car, letting the lights wash over them. Figured you could use a little Christmas that didn't feel heavy. Sunny turned to him, her eyes bright in the glow. You were right. David swallowed, his pulse thudding like a misaligned piston. About what? Her voice was quiet, but certain. This year doesn't feel like pretending. David met her gaze, and in that moment, the world narrowed to two people in a red Corvette under a canopy of lights. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but the thought was there, humming like the engine beneath them. And for the first time in years, David felt like he was moving toward something worth the ride. Chapter 11, The Gift of Time. Christmas Eve crept in quietly, the city wrapped in lights and the hush of falling snow. David had finished his last-minute errands, groceries, a bottle of wine for his parents, and was settling in for a quiet night when his phone buzzed. Sunny, got a minute? David stared at the screen, pulse ticking faster than he cared to admit. He typed back, always. Her reply came almost instantly. Can I stop by? David blinked. Stop by? Tonight? He glanced around his apartment. Tidy enough, thanks to his minimalist tendencies, and typed, sure, I'll be here. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across his window. David opened the door to find Sunny standing there, bundled in a navy coat, scarf tucked neatly around her neck. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her smile soft but certain. Hey, David said, stepping aside. Come in. She slipped inside, bringing a swirl of cold air and something else. Something warm that made the apartment feel less empty. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, unwinding her scarf. Not at all, David replied. I was just doing nothing. Sunny laughed lightly. Perfect timing then. She held out a small box, wrapped in simple brown paper and tied with twine. For you. David blinked. You didn't have to. I wanted to, she said, her voice quiet but firm. He took the box, fingers brushing hers, and for a moment, the world narrowed to that single point of contact. Then he tore the paper carefully, lifting the lid. Inside was a keychain, a sleek, polished piece of metal shaped like a Corvette emblem. But it wasn't store-bought. He could tell by the subtle imperfections, the way the edges were smoothed by hand. David swallowed. You made this. Sunny nodded, her cheeks flushing. Dad helped. I thought, you should have something that's yours, but small enough to carry everywhere. David stared at it, the weight of the gesture sinking in. This wasn't just a gift, it was understanding. Sunny. His voice caught and he cleared his throat. This is perfect. Her smile deepened, and for a moment, the quiet between them felt like the safest place in the world. David set the box down, then crossed to his desk. He picked up a small envelope and handed it to her. What's this? She asked, curious. Your turn, he said, grinning. Sunny opened it, pulling out 2 tickets, thick cardstock with bold lettering. Car show? She read aloud, her brows lifting. Biggest one in the state, David said. January. Thought you and your dad might like it. Sunny laughed, the sound warm and bright. He's going to lose his mind. David shrugged, suddenly shy. Figured it'd give us an excuse to keep talking. Sunny looked at him then, really looked, and her smile softened into something that made David's chest ache in the best way. I think we've got plenty of excuses, she said quietly. They stood there for a moment, the snow whispering against the windows, the hum of the city fading into silence. Then Sunny stepped closer, her hand brushing his. David didn't overthink it. For once, he just moved, and when their lips met, soft, tentative, like a question answered, the world felt like a road stretching out ahead, wide and open and full of possibility. Chapter 12, New Roads Ahead. Christmas morning dawned pale and quiet, the kind of winter light that made everything look softer. David woke early, not because of tradition but because his mind wouldn't let him sleep. Last night replayed in fragments. The warmth of Sunny's hand, the way her laugh felt like a melody, the kiss that had been both gentle and certain. He'd driven her home afterward, the Corvette humming like it approved, and they'd parted with promises that didn't need words. Now, sitting at his kitchen table with a mug of coffee, David realized something. He wasn't worried. Not about what came next, not about whether this would crash and burn. For the first time in years, he felt steady, like a man who'd finally found the right road. They met again 2 days later, at a quiet cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist. Sunny was already there when David walked in, her coat draped over the chair, a mug of tea steaming in front of her. She looked up, and her smile, soft, warm, unguarded, hit him like sunlight through frost. Hey, she said. Hey, David replied, sliding into the seat across from her. For a moment, they just sat there, the hum of conversation around them like background music. Then Sunny spoke, her voice calm but curious. "So what now?" David chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Straight to the big questions, huh?" Sunny's lips curved. "Might as well." He thought for a moment, then shrugged. "We take it slow. No pressure. Just see where this goes." Sunny nodded, her fingers curling around her mug. "I like that." David smiled. "Me too." They talked for an hour about cars, about music, about the ridiculousness of office politics. They laughed, they teased, and somewhere between sips of coffee and shared stories, the weight that had hung over Sunny for years seemed to lift another inch. When they stepped outside, the air was crisp, the sky streaked with winter blue. David walked her to her car, his hands shoved in his pockets, his heart steady in a way that felt new. Sunny paused before unlocking the door, turning to him with a smile that made the cold irrelevant. "You know," she said softly, "I didn't think this Christmas would feel different." David met her gaze, his own smile slow and certain. "Guess we both got surprised." She laughed, a sound he'd never get tired of, and then leaned in, kissing him like it wasn't a question anymore. As he drove home in the Corvette, the city lights glowing like promises, David realized something. Life wasn't about avoiding entanglements. It was about finding the ones worth keeping. And Sunny? She was worth every mile. Chapter 13 Epilogue. Love in the fast lane. Snow fell in lazy spirals outside the garage, settling on rooftops like powdered sugar. Inside, the air smelled faintly of motor oil and coffee, a combination David had come to think of as home. The Corvette gleamed under the overhead lights, its red paint polished to perfection. Beside it sat Russell's Stingray, equally immaculate, like two thoroughbreds waiting for the starting gun. David tightened the last bolt on the new exhaust bracket, wiped his hands on a rag, and glanced toward the doorway. Sunny stood there, leaning against the frame, her smile warm enough to melt the frost clinging to the windows. "You know," she said, her voice teasing, "most people spend Christmas morning opening gifts, not crawling under cars." David grinned, tossing the rag aside. "Most people don't have priorities this good." Sunny laughed, crossing the garage to hand him a mug of coffee. "Dad says you're corrupting me." David took the mug, his fingers brushing hers. "Pretty sure he's the one who started it." Russell's voice boomed from the kitchen. "Damn right I did." Sunny rolled her eyes, but her smile lingered. Later, they drove through the city in the Corvette, the heater humming, the world outside strung with lights. Sunny's hand rested on David's, her fingers warm against his knuckles. "Next year," she said softly, "we're doing this again." David glanced at her, his grin slow and certain. "The drive or the Christmas?" "Both," she said, her eyes bright, "but maybe with less garland drama." David chuckled. "Deal." They passed the park where the light tunnels still glowed, arching overhead like a promise. Snowflakes drifted across the windshield, catching the glow like sparks. David felt it then, the quiet certainty that had eluded him for years. Life wasn't about avoiding entanglements. It was about finding the ones worth the effort. And Sunny? She was worth every mile. 1 year later, the garage was bigger now, because dreams had a way of expanding when you let them. 2 Corvettes gleamed under the lights, and laughter spilled from the kitchen where Sunny and Russell were arguing about tire brands. David leaned against the workbench, coffee in hand, listening to the sound of home. Christmas lights twinkled outside, and for the first time in his life, David didn't just love the season. He loved what it meant. Care, patience, effort. Anything worth having takes work. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it takes a Corvette and a woman who makes you believe in magic again.